from Brisbane, 7 News with Kendall Gilding.
Good afternoon, Queensland, on a day of breaking news. Hit by a deluge, Toowoomba's CBD floods in scenes reminiscent of 2011. Low-lying residents of Grantham ordered to higher ground. Right now, people are waiting on roofs to be rescued. Swiftwater rescues across southern Queensland. Cars swept away as motorists dice with death in the floodwaters, where the heaviest rain will be falling tonight and tomorrow. Russia's terrifying invasion. Putin forces unleash on cities across Ukraine. Hundreds killed as Kyiv tries to fight back. What will the West do? And a humanitarian disaster unfolding as thousands flee across the border to safety. Europe facing a new refugee crisis. But first to the emerging crisis in Queensland. Toowoomba's CBD has flooded. Evacuation sirens are sounding in Grantham. 6 people are right now trapped on the roofs of houses there. A helicopter is trying to reach them, but conditions are difficult. This is a live look at the weather radar as waves of intense rain continue to fall on the coast and further inland. The heaviest falls overnight stretch from Noosa to the Wide Bay with 300 millimetres of rain. The Weather Bureau is warning of dangerous flash flooding with 300 millimetres possible in a 6-hour window. Max Butcher is by the Brisbane River. Max, the rain has been relentless today.
Oh, sure has, Kendall. After days of teasing the southeast, overnight this system has certainly unleashed, dropping huge totals from here north to Bundaberg, as well west of Brisbane, flooding the Lockyer Valley and the centre of Toowoomba. Emily Arnold is in the Lockyer Valley for us today. Emily, we understand 6 people are trapped on rooftops there right now.
Yeah, that's right, Max. This is some breaking news that has just come in from the emergency briefing this afternoon. We are 2 kilometres outside of Grantham at the moment. Behind us is the railway bridge, and as you can see, it is completely under. Behind us, you can also see some fire crews who are heading over in boats. They've just kitted up and will hopefully be trying to rescue these people because emergency services can't get a helicopter to them at this stage because the weather is just too poor. It really has deteriorated again in the past 10 minutes. Now, the rain has been relentless throughout the day. Up to 300 millimetres has fallen in some parts of the Lockyer Valley. The sirens, emergency flood warning sirens, started sounding in Grantham around 1:30, and it's hard to imagine how residents there would have felt hearing those. They have been through this before. They've been through it in 2011, so we certainly hope that those 6 people are okay. Now, the water hit Toowoomba earlier this morning, flooding businesses in the main street there. That will no doubt have a big clean up now. It also swept through Withcott as well as Helidon, where we witnessed a couple in their 80s. They had to be rescued by a swift water crew after water quickly rose around their home.
I walked across to the kitchen window and all I could see was water everywhere. And so Pete said, come on, we got to get out.
Yeah, now this situation is certainly developing this afternoon. As soon as we can get into Grantham, as soon as it is safe to do so, we will. But we will bring you updates throughout the afternoon and evening, especially on those 6 people trapped on their roofs at the moment, Max.
Yes, there's a troubling sense of deja vu, isn't it? Thanks for that, Emily. Let's go to Georgia Costi now at Redcliffe. Georgia, this peninsula is being hit with heavy rain right now.
Max, the rain has been relentless on the north side of Brisbane. Currently here in Redcliffe, the downpour has well and truly started. The Weather Bureau says that this region has already received well and truly over its average monthly rainfall total. And of course, we do know that we still have a few more days of these conditions expected. The wind gusts are also strong. We're recording wind gusts of 46 kilometres an hour. And of course, that is stirring up the winds here at the Redcliffe jetty. But these slow-moving, dangerous thunderstorms have parked themselves here, as well as at Caboolture this morning. A family was rescued after their station wagon became stuck in floodwaters. Swiftwater crews were able to get the family to safely before the vehicle was washed away. They've been going from one job to the next. Crews also waded through waters in the Centenary Lakes Park next to the Caboolture River looking for missing people. Thankfully, however, that job was a false alarm. Creeks have burst into banks, cutting roads across Greater Brisbane. Here on the coastline, it's those winds I mentioned making the systems feel so intense.
We do need some rain, but we don't perhaps need that much, do we?
And I've jumped a few puddles and I'll go back and have a shower and get dry again.
A strong wind warning has been issued for coastal areas from central Queensland all the way to the Gold Coast.
Thanks to Georgia Costi reporting there from Redcliffe. Well, let's go to Sam Heathwood now. She's at Ipswich, which is just one of the waterlogged areas in the southeast today.
With so much rain across the southeast, rivers and creeks are breaking their banks and some dams have reached capacity, including Somerset Dam, which is now releasing water into Wivenhoe. Overnight, a deluge dumping hundreds of millimetres across the southeast.
Brisbane is in the flood watch area, so that means that it is a watch and wait situation.
The highest in Greater Brisbane, 250 millimetres at Mount Glorious, flooding roads and bridges.
They went to school and then high school rang and said my daughter was the last kid at school, so could I please come and get her? So I had to get a friend to go and pick her up.
Suburban creeks now raging torrents like this one at Jimboomba. At 2nd Avenue Bridge in Marsden, one driver taking a risk we've been warned against so many times.
He's going to have to now try to get out by foot and get back the other way.
What's disappointing to me is that we are actually seeing the footage of people driving into floodwaters.
The combined water grid has risen by 3% since Monday to 73%. Now Wivenhoe is at 60% capacity. It's still got 40% until it's full, but we'll reveal what that means over the coming days in 7 News tonight at 6.
Sam Heathwood reporting. Well, Rosie King's son is on the Sunshine Coast where residents are weathering round 2 of this intense system.
Max, if the Tuesday night deadly deluge wasn't enough, residents on the Sunshine Coast have been hammered again. There have been dozens of calls for help across the region in the past 24 hours. A couple had to be rescued from floodwaters in Nambour this morning. They'd stopped their car on the side of the road, a rest during their overnight travels, and woke to rising water.
There was literally one puddle, sweetie, one puddle there. Thought fine, went up, parked. 5 hours later, woke up to keep going. Water everywhere. I was just... look at it.
The hinterland in the firing line, this is Whopper Dam. The road to Kilcoy is cut. Residents on either side are stranded.
Probably just going to have to crash. Probably in the car, maybe, I imagine. I imagine that's what everyone else would probably be doing if this water doesn't, go away.
Australia Zoo has been forced to close due to flooding. At Imbil, the road is split in two and rapids rushing in between. The beaches are pumping, many are closed. This situation is unfolding. Authorities warning up to 300 millimetres could fall in some areas over the next 24 hours. We'll bring you the most up-to-date information in the news at 6 o'clock.
OK, let's head further south now into Josh Riveridge. He's on the Gold Coast where flooding has cut a community completely off on the hinterland.
Deep in the hinterland, residents of Illumbah and Flying Fox Valleys have this causeway was under repair, but days of heavy rain caused the river to break through it yesterday. Locals say there is limited access by foot through private property, but no vehicles can cross, leaving many effectively stranded until further repairs are done. Most of this fast-flowing water is expected to continue for days, with plenty of runoff following more heavy overnight falls higher up, including 171 millimetres at Springbrook. The Hinns Dam is at more than 108% capacity now. The spillway has almost 2 metres of water charging over the top and is continuing to rise. The runoff from the hinterland has forced lifeguards to close all the city's beaches. There's a massive debris being washed down the creeks and rivers. At Point Danger, the rainwater mixed with the sea and has created a massive foam which has covered the shoreline rocks. With ocean conditions to remain rough and more flood runoff still to make its way downstream, lifeguards say it's likely many of the Gold Coast beaches will remain closed tomorrow.
Josh Riveridge reporting there in the hinterland. So, Paul Bird, what's it like down at sea level?
Well, I can tell you now, Maxie, dry as a bone here. In fact, the seaway has recorded 0 millimetres throughout the day, although 100 k's to the north of us, or even 50 kilometres, we're seeing the edge of that system dropping a lot of rain. Of course, what we're seeing here is an increase in the ocean sway. You can see behind us here at the moment, it's starting to push through across the seaway, closing out the southern entrance. No boating activity for the next weekend. Wave recording stations already recording waves, which they're anchored about at 2 k's offshore, recording waves upwards of around 2.5 to 4 metres at the moment. Of course, beach closures will last all the way through to the weekend as that swell and weather conditions continue to deteriorate. Max?
Oh, Bertie, it might be dry there, but it is pouring down here in the city. So, Tony Auden, you first raised the alarm on this. How much more intense rain can we expect?
Well, Max, with the forecast model struggling for this event, we need to go back to first principles for an answer. Now, this is the water vapour satellite imagery. It shows the upper levels of the atmosphere. And here we can see a low in the upper atmosphere sitting over southern Queensland. It's helping to feed humid northeast winds into this rain system. Looking ahead, it's expected to hover over the southeast tomorrow before likely clearing offshore eventually by late Sunday, eventually bringing that drier air. So we still have the potential for heavy rain until it clears, i.e. late Sunday, and that could still equate to widespread falls of over 300 millimetres anywhere in the southeast up towards Gympie and Bundaberg, and some pockets of much heavier rain. So this event is far from over. Checking the current radar, still a large area of moderate to heavy rain lying from Toowoomba across the Lockyer Valley to areas north of Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. A band of more intense rain moving past Redcliffe and Moreton Island. There could be strong wind gusts in there too. Max, I'll be back soon with the latest.
Thanks, Tony and Kendall. Much more to come on the flooding situation this hour and, of course, at 6. But for now, back to you.
Thanks, Max. We'll see you soon. Well, next, today's other huge story reports Kyiv could fall by the weekend. Casualties mount on both sides as Russia's military forces try to encircle the Ukraine capital. America's next move after punishing sanctions failed to deter President Putin. And Queenslanders protesting right now against Russian aggression.
In 7 News, flood rains arrive. From Brisbane to Bundaberg, the Gold Coast to the Downs. The developments as the emergency unfolds. Plus, war in Ukraine. Dramatic pictures as Russia takes hold. Live to our experienced reporters. 2 major stories, special coverage. It's why Queenslanders turn to 7 News at 6. Know every critical development.
Global peace is under threat tonight.
A state of emergency is being enforced in Ukraine.
You'll know every breaking moment.
Conditions are deteriorating with another deluge still forecast. So it will be a very nervous 24 hours.
7 News, Queensland's #1.
Desperate fighting is continuing in Ukraine tonight as Russian forces attempt to encircle the capital Kyiv and depose the democratically elected government. During a nationwide address, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky praised the heroics of the men and women defending his country, while criticising the West for not doing enough to help. US intelligence sources believe the country could fall to the Russian invaders as early as this weekend. We have live coverage from the besieged country and also the US capital. Firstly, to reporter Jeff Parry, who is in Lviv. Jeff, a humanitarian disaster is unfolding where you are.
Yes, it is, Kendall, and it seems to get bigger as the military situation deepens. Thousands and thousands of people trying to make their way to the Polish border, stuck in massive traffic jams and a very slow process to get through to some safety in Poland or in Hungary. As you say, there have been more rocket attacks on Kiev in the last several hours. It's an important city. It's a city of 300 million, but it's also where Vladimir Zelensky is, and he outed himself today as Vladimir Putin's #1 target. The Russian invasion started before dawn with an artillery barrage and quickly became a full-scale air and land assault. Russian gunships swooping in on a military airbase near the capital, Kiev. Above the city, 2 Ukrainian fighter jets raced towards the battle. At least 1 Russian helicopter was shot down, and in the afternoon, Russian airborne troops were spotted on the outskirts of the airbase, apparently in control.
And it has not been taken back by the Ukrainian military. It is the Russian military. You can see them now moving back to a different position.
Elsewhere, 3 columns of armour drove deep wedges into Ukrainian territory from the north, the northeast and the south, all marked with a white-painted Z as a mark of recognition. But it is clear the Russians have not had it all their own way. Ukrainian troops have taken out Russian tanks, pictures of burning Russian armour appearing from across the country. The Ukrainian president has addressed the nation.
What we're hearing today, it's the sound of a new Iron Curtain descending, cutting Russia off from the civilized world. It is our task as a nation to make sure that this Iron Curtain doesn't pass through our Ukrainian territory.
Late yesterday, as he launched the war, Putin hinted at the use of nuclear weapons.
Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, for our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and lead you to such consequences that you have never encountered in your history.
Military observers say Russia has launched at least 100 missile attacks. This is the remains of a radar station near the Black Sea coast in the south of the country. Here, a cruise missile streaks across the sky to strike a Ukrainian airbase near Lviv. Long lines of traffic have choked Ukraine's major highways as civilians try to flee to safety. And in the Chernobyl area, where there's been some fierce fighting, Russian tanks have captured, if you like, the old Chernobyl nuclear power station. And worryingly, we're told they have taken hostages. Kendall.
All right, thank you so much, Jeff. Let's go to the American capital now, and our reporter Ash Mullaney. Ash, is it too early to gauge whether the coordinated sanctions on Russia will have any impact?
Kendall, the White House says it may be weeks before we see the full effects of these sanctions, but from what we're seeing on the ground in Ukraine, they're proving to be no deterrents for Vladimir Putin. The US president has condemned Russia's actions, describing them as a brutal assault on Ukraine. He has announced these further sanctions targeting Russia's economy and hitting 4 major Russian banks and freezing more than $1 trillion in assets. He has also restricted the export of technology goods to Russia. Now, no plans to send in American troops to the Ukraine. President Biden has been insistent on that. However, he has sent another 7,000 troops to Germany. This was the president speaking earlier today.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen.
Now, as President Biden deals with this crisis, his predecessor has chimed in from the sidelines. Donald Trump releasing a statement saying, if I were in office, this deadly Ukraine situation would have never happened. A somber warning from the Pentagon today that they believe Russia is looking to take over Kiev, Ukraine's capital. Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, tonight asked whether he believed that was Vladimir Putin's intention. He said yes, he believed that is exactly what he intends to do. Kendall?
All right, thank you, Ashley Mullaney in Washington, D.C. and also Jeff Parry in Ukraine. Dozens of Ukrainians, Russians and Australians have come together in King George Square, condemning the war and needless violence from Vladimir Putin, calling on all Australians to do the same. Almost all have relatives in Ukraine. Australian citizen Tanya has a sister trying to flee the country with her husband and 5-year-old child.
She's trying to flee the country. We applied for visas and we got a request for health examination.
13,000 Ukraine-born people live in Australia and nearly 50,000 have Ukrainian ancestry. Australia's cricket world is holding its collective breath. Next, an update on the condition of wicket-keeping legend Rod Marsh following his heart attack in Bundaberg. And a COVID scare at the Broncos on the eve of their final trial match. There are encouraging signs for cricket great Rod Marsh. The former Australian wicketkeeper is in Bundaberg Hospital after suffering a major heart attack yesterday. Former players and his family have been at his bedside. Early tests have shown some positive signs. He was in Bundaberg for a Bulls Masters charity event. At 6 o'clock, we'll cross live to Pat Welsh for the latest on his condition. And that is encouraging news, Katie, but there's some health issues at the Broncos.
Yeah, there is a COVID scare, Kendall. G'day, everyone. Albert Kelly's doubtful for the Broncos' final trial in Mackay tomorrow, but all handling Billy Walters a clear run at their famous number 6 jersey. Tyson Gamble trained in Kelly's place today after being sent for a PCR test with symptoms. Kelly and Walters had the front running in a 4-way race to partner Adam Reynolds.
I'd say it's healthy competition. I think they all want to make each other better. It's not like they don't talk to each other. You want to have 4 or 5 good players that you have to choose from rather than one really good player and then a couple of, I don't know. So it's like the type of problem the coach would want to have, I'd say.
And at 6, the great story around Jordan Pereira, Mackay's countryman, for their trial, where we go with the Broncos winger. It was an 89-point thrashing, but the Lions are looking past the scoreline after this morning's practice match against the Crows at Carrara. Brisbane held their breath when Dan Rich was forced off under the blood rule, but he returned to see 10 different teammates kick goals. McStay 4, Cameron, Danaher and Jared Berry added 3 apiece, but the comebacks of Rayner and Ashworth, plus club debutants Darcy Wilmot and Fort, was the most pleasing.
Play together means building connection, and that was a real focus outside the scoreline.
And something for Suns fans to smile about. They lead Port by 11 goals heading into the final quarter of their trial. That's it in sport, Kendall.
Go the Sunnies. Thanks, Katie. Well, it's time to see what's coming up in 7 News at 6 in our Gold Coast Bulletin. Let's bring in Max and Steve. Max, we have crews across Queensland gathering the latest on the floods.
Yes, Kendall, tonight this is the impact of hundreds of millimetres of rainfall. Cars have been washed off causeways, motorists rescued after becoming trapped in floodwaters. And then there are the pictures from Toowoomba and the Lockyer Valley, which really look so much like 2011. Plus, today's other developing story, live to Europe, where war in Ukraine is raging. Hundreds killed as Russian forces unleash across the country.
Thank you, Max. Steve, you'll also check on the impact of the weather event on the Gold Coast.
From the beach to deep into the hinterland, we'll bring Gold Coast the latest on the impact here. The rain not as heavy so far, but the runoff will impact beaches for days. And Big Brother is watching. We take you behind the scenes of Gold Coast Council's new security surveillance system, how new technology is delivering pictures clearer than ever before. Kendall, to help keep the city safe.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks, Max. Our Gold Coast viewers are off to the chase. Your local news at 5:30. Then Sharon and Max will be back with 7 News at 6. For the rest of Queensland, an update on those people stranded on their roofs in floodwater, the frantic efforts to save lives and evacuate inundated areas as the flood emergency shows no signs of ending. We'll take you to the Ukraine border where a humanitarian crisis is unfolding. And later after the weather, the unbelievable story of the Outback Aussie battlers whose numbers finally came up.
In 7 News, flood rains arrive. From Brisbane to Bundaberg, the Gold Coast to the Downs. The developments as the emergency unfolds. Plus, war in Ukraine. Dramatic pictures as Russia takes hold. Live to our experienced reporters. 2 major stories, special coverage. It's why Queenslanders turn to 7 News at 6. Know every critical development.
Global peace is under threat tonight.
A state of emergency is being enforced in Ukraine.
You'll know every breaking moment.
Conditions are deteriorating with another deluge still forecast.
So it will be a very nervous 24 hours.
7 News, Queensland's #1.
Live from Brisbane, 7 News with Kendall Gilding.
Welcome back. Dominating today's news, the flood emergency gripping southeast Queensland. Moments ago, 5 people and a dog were rescued from a rooftop at Grantham. Emergency crews battled heavy rain and worsening conditions to reach them. Floodwaters are threatening many communities in scenes reminiscent of the devastating 2011 floods. Russia's military forces are continuing to pound Ukrainian cities and military installations as they advance on the capital, Kyiv. But they're not having it all their way. Ukrainian forces are said to be putting up stiff resistance, downing helicopters and taking Russian soldiers prisoner. And family and friends of cricketing great Rod Marsh say the former Aussie wicketkeeper is making steady progress following a massive heart attack in Bundaberg yesterday. More now on the flood situation. We return to Max Futcher, who's at Kangaroo Point. Max, the severe weather warnings remain in place.
They do, Kendall. Toowoomba's CBD has flooded. A frantic evacuation is underway in Gympie and swift water rescue crews have saved several lives in an unfolding flood emergency in the southeast. The heaviest falls overnight stretched from Noosa to the Wide Bay with 300 millimetres of rain. Joel Dry has this overview of the situation.
Well, the rain has been absolutely relentless overnight and it has continued right throughout the day, and as a result there is widespread flooding across the southeast, and due to that these guys here have had an absolutely massive workload. Swift water rescue crews have gone from one job to the next with a lot of people needing assistance. The dangerous conditions have resulted from a large, slow-moving system of dangerous thunderstorms that is hovering over the southeast. In Toowoomba, locals are watching on from rooftops as parts of the city go under with floodwaters covering roads and gushing into shops. All that rain is racing down the range. It was dangerous for drivers, more so for residents at the bottom of the hill. This is Withcott. Floodwaters are surrounding homes and businesses. The system moved west this morning after dumping torrential rain on the coastline overnight. Several drivers were caught out. A family was actually rescued early this morning at Caboolture before their station wagon was washed away. On the Sunshine Coast, swiftwater rescue crews saved a couple at Nambour.
I don't think I've been frightened before like that. It was quite frightening, terrifying.
They'd pulled over for a rest on a road trip and woke up to this.
There was literally one puddle, sweetie, one puddle there. Thought fine, went up, parked. 5 hours later, woke up to keep going. Water everywhere. I was just, look at it.
Several places from Noosa to the Wide Bay recorded more than 300 millimetres of rain overnight, cutting highways. In Gympie, the Mary River is rising, and a frantic evacuation began this morning. Businesses brought in shipping containers to pack up and get out.
Council came down earlier and expected it to be 21 metres, which is halfway up this wall.
Officers are being cleared out, with the Weather Bureau warning the Mary River could exceed the major flood level tonight. These catchments, which are being hit with torrential rain, are already soaked. Whopper Dam on the Sunshine Coast is roaring and raging. Heavy falls are extending all the way to the Gold Coast, whipping up rough seas and foam along the coastline. And the workload for these crews throughout the southeast is expected to continue throughout this afternoon. The forecast is for intense rain, only easing up when we get into the middle part of tomorrow.
Thanks, Joel. And as Joel just mentioned, the Mary River has now burst its banks and sending muddy waters into Gympie's CBD. Anna McGraw, the town is bracing for severe flooding in the centre of town.
Yeah, good afternoon, Max. Well, the Weather Bureau is warning people that this flood will be as bad as the 1999 floods here in Gympie, meaning that the CBD is expected to be completely submerged by floodwaters. As you can see, they've already moved in and they're setting in quite quickly. It's only taken about an hour for all of this to go under this afternoon. Now, since early this morning, there's been more than 300 millimetres of widespread falls in those already soaked catchments around the Mary River. And the river is currently sitting at 16 metres high, meaning that the two main bridges in town are now cut, separating the north and south sides of Gympie as well. The road connecting Gympie to the southern part of the Bruce Highway is cut, meaning people cannot travel south at this stage. Now, business owners in Mary Street, as mentioned earlier, have been frantic all day trying to get everything they can out and save it before the floodwaters do set in. Take a listen at what they had to say.
No, we didn't expect it. It's taken everybody by surprise, to be perfectly honest, because there's been so much rain so fast.
Now, the Bureau is predicting that the Mary River will peak at 22 metres. That means Mary Street, water will be up to the ceilings of all those businesses. It's still raining here in Gympie. There's more rain predicted this afternoon and this evening. So people are being urged to stay at home if they can, listen to all of the warnings and stay on top of things. But we'll continue to bring you all of the updates on this unfolding emergency here in Gympie tonight in the news at 6.
All right, thanks, Anna. On the New South Wales Central Coast, a man has died after trying to drive through floodwaters. The 54-year-old attempted to cross a flooded creek at Matcham when his four-wheel drive was swept away. His body was found inside the vehicle. Of course, Kendall, this is a developing situation. We'll bring you full coverage in tonight's bulletin at 6 p.m.
An anxious 24 hours ahead. Thank you so much, Max. Well, as mentioned earlier, Ukraine's capital is under threat as we go to air. Top US officials claim Kyiv is being surrounded by Russian troops. As the Ukrainian government faces annihilation, the humanitarian crisis is broadening by the minute. Senior correspondent Chris Reason is at the Ukraine-Poland border.
Well, this is the border control point at Krakovec and the border between Ukraine and Poland. Poland being just 100 metres further up the road here. And as you can see, thousands of cars and people queuing to get across that border tonight. It has been like this. We arrived several hours ago now, and this traffic has not moved much. And the queue, I can tell you, goes for kilometres back that way. This is the consequence of what has been happening within Ukraine today after the Russians invaded by land, sea and air. Thousands of Ukrainians deciding to pack up what they could, grab what they could, get into their cars and head for the border and safety.
And it's the 21st century, of course, and no one ever thought that this would be happening in the middle of Europe. It's heartbreaking because I think people of Ukraine deserve better. They have chosen their path. They want to live in a free, democratic state.
Now, the Polish authorities have been preparing for this moment for weeks. The central government there had put out word to all of the provincial governments along the border, telling them to prepare for this influx of refugees. And Poland's opened up 8 border crossings, but this is something that's not just being seen on the Polish border, but of course on the other borders with other neighbouring countries around Ukraine. We're talking about Romania, Hungary, Moldova, all of them getting ready to accept what is expected to be not just hundreds of thousands of refugees, but one aid agency estimating potentially millions as this conflict goes on through weeks and months to come.
The economic fallout of Russia's invasion has rocked the Australian share market, but it wasn't all bad news. Stephen Daglian from CommSec has the latest.
Good afternoon. Well, look, the Aussie market did manage to lift slightly today by just 0.1%, so very uninspired trade for our market. Not surprising considering that the world is still watching Russia attack Ukraine at the moment, and also following on from the worst day in 17 months for our market on Thursday. It essentially means that we've put an end to a 3-week winning streak. So over the past 5 days, we've essentially fallen back by around 3%. Tech stocks stood out today. One of the best was actually Block. This is the US tech firm that recently bought Afterpay. Released some profit results last night, which were well received. It rose 33%. We had a handful of companies also releasing their profit results. That included building products maker Adbri, Ardent Leisure, the owner of Dreamworld and Whitewater World in Queensland, and also retailer Harvey Norman, and shares in all 3 jumped up. Some of the worst performers today included the banks, the insurers, gold miners, which have done really well over the past couple of weeks due to the situation in Eastern Europe, and the Aussie dollar is a bit softer at 71.9 US.
Stephen Daglian there. Coming up, the winners of last night's mammoth Powerball. Also, the Police Ethical Standards Unit called in after a Townsville teen drowns. And in the US, 3 more officers convicted over the death of George Floyd. Townsville police recovered the body of a teenager this morning following a search of the Ross River at Thuringowa. It's believed the teen, along with another man, jumped into the river to avoid arrest after 2 stolen cars were stopped with tyre spikes early yesterday morning. Some hours later, police were notified that the younger man was missing and an extensive search conducted.
There's no indication here that the police have chased anyone into the river. There's no indication that the police have done anything wrong here.
The Ethical Standards Unit is overseeing the investigation into the teen's death. The Premier's personal popularity has taken a hit amid the integrity scandal in a new poll. It comes as the corruption watchdog finally reveals some details about a mysterious laptop. State political editor Marlena Wapp has more.
The Premier's hit the road for Rockhampton, but the integrity crisis continues to follow her. New polling shows her personal popularity has been affected. A third of voters in the YouGov poll in the Courier Mail view Anastasia Palaszczuk less favourably due to integrity issues.
I'm out and about talking to Queenslanders each and every day, and, you know, I never take their trust for granted, and what you see is what you get.
The acting head of the Crime and Corruption Commission has finally revealed more details about investigations into a laptop that was taken by the Public Service Commission from inside the office of the Integrity Commissioner.
Matters relating to laptops and their contents are part of investigation Operation Workshop. That relates to the potential release of confidential information, that forms part of that investigation.
And I'll have more details about Operation Workshop in the news at 6.
3 former US police officers have been convicted of violating the civil rights of George Floyd, who was murdered by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin during an arrest in 2020. They were found guilty of not intervening when Chauvin placed his knee on the neck of Floyd, which led to the 46-year-old's death.
This is just accountability. It can never be justice because I can never get George back.
The 3 officers will face a separate trial on charges of aiding and abetting murder. Queen Elizabeth has postponed 2 more virtual engagements as she continues to recover from COVID. She's been suffering from mild cold-like symptoms, according to Buckingham Palace. Despite turning 95 this year, the Queen continues to take part in regular public appearances. And the world's first NFT ATM has opened in New York. It sells digital artworks of colour swatches for around $7 each and virtual pigeons for just over $500. Purchasers get a small box with a QR code that allows users to register their virtual art. We all have bad days in the office, but spare a thought for 9 workers who had to be rescued from atop a burning oil rig in Texas. The men were helping dismantle the decommissioned rig for scrap when fire broke out. A US Coast Guard helicopter was brought in to pluck them from the floating shipyard. Well, how much more rain is on the way? Tony has the critical forecast next. And the beers are flowing after a syndicate shared in a big chunk of last night's record Powerball payout.
In 7 News, flood rains arrive. From Brisbane to Bundaberg, the Gold Coast to the Downs, the developments as the emergency unfolds. Plus, war in Ukraine. Dramatic pictures as Russia takes hold. Live to our experienced reporters. 2 major stories, special coverage. It's why Queenslanders turn to 7 News at 6.
Good afternoon, you're watching 7 News. Checking the weather now, and the forecast rain has arrived with a vengeance today. We started the day with severe flash flooding and storms up towards 1770 and Bundaberg as the large band of rain swept past Gympie and the Sunshine Coast and currently lies further inland towards Toowoomba and the Lockyer Valley. The bad news, this heavy rain is getting well inland and it's tracking along the worst case scenario expected over the past few days, so significant flooding is possible for those inland catchments. Now looking ahead, the models are struggling with the intensity of this system, so we need to go back to basics and figure out how long that heavy rain can continue. That's looking like around Sunday lunchtime when the upper low driving this rain finally clears offshore. In that time, we could easily still accumulate widespread totals of over 300 millimetres across the southeast and up towards Gympie. Now to northern Queensland, sunny and hot for Cairns and Townsville. Mackay could see an afternoon shower tomorrow. Heading south, showers for the Capricornia, severe storms possible from about Bundaberg south, then heavy rain more likely from the Fraser Coast south along the ranges. In the southeast, we can expect more heavy rain, widespread totals pushing 200 to 300 millimetres, but exactly where it falls will be crucial to how nasty this flooding gets. That is hard to narrow down. More flash flooding is likely, and we need to keep an eye on the Bremer River and Lockyer Creek for any flooding risks through Ipswich and Brisbane in coming days. Kendall, the latest models are due in the next hour. I'll have a full update coming up at 6.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Tony. 250 people in a WA outback mining town have won half of last night's record Powerball, sharing a massive $63 million. The lucky winners were part of a Pay Your Mortgage syndicate organised by the local newsagents in Kalgoorlie. Joey Cantanzaro was there as punters checked their tickets.
It's a gold rush town, but here in Kalgoorlie today, it's Powerball, not prospecting, that's made 250 locals $250,000 richer overnight. From red dirt to pay dirt. The only thing bigger than the sheer number of lucky locals, the smiles on their faces.
Steph just said, I want to buy a ticket. And I was like, yeah, rightio. She said, I'll shout you. And I was like, okay. And then she rang me. I can't believe it.
The winning syndicate was organised by City News Kalgoorlie owners Kevin and Tanya Parks. And there was a gold rush through the front doors this morning.
They were just in tears, blown away.
250 locals paid $100 each for a share in a $25,000 ticket. And their syndicate took out $63 million of last night's record $120 million Powerball draw. Each ticket today worth $252,000.
I'm still in shock.
Some were surprised.
Joseph didn't want to buy a ticket. He said, no, I'd rather spend the money on petrol.
Others, double lucky.
Yeah, we had 2 in the syndicate.
How does that feel?
Oh, pretty bloody good.
And the Powerball winners here have hit quite the deposit. The median house price in this town, $305,000. The other big winner, the pubs. There's about 25 of them in the Kalgoorlie region, and we're told they will be full tonight.
Well, that is all we have time for this Friday. Join Max and Sharon for the latest on the southeast flooding in 7 News at 6. I'm Kendall Gilding. Stay safe and have a great weekend.